Hello everyone. How's everyone doing? I'm sorry about that. Hi, new subscribers. Hi, subscribers. Thank you for supporting the channel, Chemistry. I'm Reverend Penelope Stewart. Thank you for being here today. Check out our Facebook page and our spiritual services that we offer. And check out our new course that we're offering as well. Know thyself. Get involved with integrating with spirit into your life. Today I want to talk about elementals. I've never talked about fairies, elves, gnomes, little people. I've never talked about that, or just connected with nature. I've never just talked about that. Yet I go out in nature. I talked about Orisha and my experience with the Orisha, and I don't know if I went into detail on what the Orisha really are, and how to really connect with them and how important nature is. But it's very, very important. I know when I first connected with the Orishas, I got my sign in nature. Every sign in nature. I saw a man that looked exactly like Ileba. I said my ritual, it stopped raining, the sun came out above my head. I started seeing these white birds. When I was saying the prayer, I felt like I was in a church, like my voice was echoing, like I was in this room and it was echoing. It was a very magical experience when I connected with the Orisha. Okay, and that's when I did my water ritual too. I went out there to do a water ritual. Yeah, and that urge was on me. That's when I first did my very first dedication to the Orisha and began to pray for my ancestors, and they guided me to go out there and do that. So that was one of my contacts, phenomenal contacts I had with nature. I was in nature one time in Hot Springs. We were at this cottage, and behind our cottage were like these beautiful trees. These trees went on for miles and miles and miles. I mean, they were big, beautiful trees. And I was out there, and it was getting kind of dusk dark, and it was really, really quiet. We were in Hot Springs Village. It was really, really quiet, and all of a sudden, I could hear the trees talking to each other, like branches moving, knocking, coming from the trees. One would knock far and one would knock near. You can tell that they were talking. It was a sort of a rhythm, a communication. I couldn't believe I was experiencing that, but the trees were, there was no explanation for it. There were no explanation for it, but these trees were communicating, talking with each other. So when you go out into the woods, and if you really listen, because you're listening for, I've heard birds. When I make sure I'm listening when I go out. Some days I go out and I hear birds. I hear birds singing. Then other days I go out and I hear an orchestra of crickets singing. There's overwhelmed by this sound of crickets. You can't even hear the birds because the crickets are so loud. So I'm really paying attention. So make sure you're paying attention too, because they are speaking to each other, and you're probably not even aware of nature is even speaking to each other or even responding to your consciousness. So you see that as well. The first time I think I saw a real little person is when I was in Dupree Park. That's where I seen the eagle, where I get most of my spiritual signs at. Funny that I talk about that. But I went out there and I gave a offering when I came in contact with this little person. It was just one day I was walking, and during this time I had just started my research on fairies too. That's something. And I was like, oh, I don't know if they're real or not. And out there's very tall trees out there too. It's so beautiful. But there's woods out there, and then it's kind of like high grass in between the woods in certain places. It's very woody out there. And during this time, like I said, I was doing a lot of research on fairies and stuff, just trying to see if this, doing my research on it, because I hadn't had my personal experience. I had heard of other people experience, but I hadn't had my personal experience with a fairy or a gnome or a little person. So I didn't know if they existed. So I began to do my research on the topic. And I was out there walking and I saw this little something. I felt the hands though. I felt these hands run between my legs. Run between my legs. I almost tripped. I could have tripped. Run between my legs and then dive. As I began to look at it, it morphed. It just disappeared. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I just see that? I couldn't believe I saw that. I couldn't believe that it was true. I was like, that could be no explanation but that, and then in that part too, there's a lot of trees with holes in the bottom of them, they say that's a sign of fairies too when you see those holes in trees like that. Another sign of fairies when you see a tree in a field, in an empty field. When you see a big beautiful tree in an empty field, that's the indication that it could be fairies around as well, because that's a mystical tree. So look out for those trees, those beautiful trees that stand alone in a field by themselves. There's something magical going on with them. So I went out there and I left an offering to to that nature spirit that was out there, because I figured it was a nature spirit that was probably responsible for taking care of that park or whatever, because each park, they have assignments where they're supposed to take care of mountains, lakes, rivers. So I felt like that particular spirit was taking care of that area. So I set down an offering for that little person or being or whatever it was, but they do exist. My mother talked about her experience. I had an uncle who was into some type of spiritual art. He he came in contact with some fairies, and these fairies were flying around my mom, and she said it was so horrifying. They were laughing at her. She couldn't believe it was little people. Her and my uncle swear that they saw these fairies, and she said they exist. So there was her experience. And then I had a friend of mine. She was down at the Arkansas River, and she was getting ready to kill herself. She said she was committing suicide. She was halfway into the river, and she kept sobbing and crying. And she said all of a sudden the water rose up in the shape of a man. She said it was like a big waterfall shaped like a man penny. And I was like, are you kidding me? She was like, no, I'm not kidding you. It was a waterfall shaped like a man. And he told me to come on out there, and they've been waiting on me. She said, girl, that scared me so bad. I got up out of the water so quick. So see, they're very mischievous as well. They're very mischievous as well. But there's also a story about Yemayatu. If you go to the sea and you're crying too much and you're too sad and you're sobbing, then your Maya will take you and just stop your suffering. If she feel like you're suffering too much in your life, she'll take you. So they're very mischievous. And then you have people too that swear they see these little green things, these little things, these little monsters or whatever, these little green monsters. You have those as well. I don't know what to call them, trolls, gnomes. I don't know what to call them, but you have people that they see them. I don't know what to call that, but yeah, I have my experience with them. I believe fairies, these elementals are real. There's a connection. There's something powerful when you go sit by a river. There's something powerful when you go sit by the sea or the ocean. There's an energy there. There's something powerful when you look at a mountain. There's something going on there. There's something in us, that energy, that connection. You can feel that vibration of the presence of that mountain or that ocean or that river. It has a profound effect on us on a deeper level. So yeah, there's such thing as these elementals, and you can connect with nature just going out there listening, you know, keeping your mind on connecting with nature when you out there, you know. Compliment the tree, because I compliment the trees when I go walk. When I walk, I'm constantly telling the trees how gorgeous they are, how pretty the flowers are, how beautiful the pond is. You know, I'm constantly, when I see the pond, I think of Oshun, you know. I'm just constantly, you know, when I see the insects, I think of Oya, or the wind blows, I think of Oya, you know. Uh, that's me. You know, when every time I look at nature, I can see the Orisha, I can see the Neteru, you know, as Shu, Newt, you know, I see that those elements in nature, and our ancestors, you know, personified them. And you'll see that too with the angels. Each angel that represents an element of nature as well. Okay, it's each angel that represent an element in nature as well. The Native Americans also believed in little people. They call them what they call them, Quanaka, Quanakasha, Quanakasha. That's what they call them. The Choctaw Natives, they call them Quanashaka. And they lived in little caves, and sometimes they would carry away little boys in order to test their spirit. So they did some type of initiation with the little boys, and Native American little boys. In the 1930s, they discovered a mummy in San Pedro Mountains in a cave. It was speculated that there were a tiny race of humans that lived in caves within the mountains. This little mummy was sitting upright, had a flattened skull. It also had very tan skin as well. Okay? There are legends of little people told by the Native American tribe. So they talk about little people as well. The African fairies are known as Aziza. They are a type of Bolivian supernatural race in the West African Dahomey mythology, living in the forest. Okay? They provide good magic for hunters. They are also known to have practical and spiritual knowledge, including knowledge of fire. The Aziza are described as little hairy people, are said to live in ant hills and sip cotton trees. And then they talk about the existing dwarfs of the Congo forest. They gave rise to the belief in the existing creatures allied to man who could assume at will invisibility. Traits in the character of the Congo dwarfs of the present day recall irresistible the Potts and Puck of Robin Goodfellow of the Gnomes and Fairies of German and Celtic tradition. So they're letting you know these people, they mimic. They're just like the Gnomes and Fairies in German and Celtic tradition. Central Pygmies, as I have and has noted, their merry, impish ways, their little songs, their little dances, their mischievous pranks, unseen, spiteful vengeance, quick gratitude, and prompt return for kindness cannot be struck by their singular resemblance in character to the elves and gnomes and sprites of nursery stories. So they're letting you know that the pygmies are related to that. The pygmies can trace their descendants back to these fairies or gnomes and all that. They did a study on that. Okay, the British the following text date related to the British territory in Eastern Africa hint that possibility of the men of pygmy Negro type have spread over the part of Europe. It has even been hinted by more than one anthropologist of authority that a dwarf Negro race may have at one time existed in Northern Europe, and by exaggeration in the legend and story of the peculiar habits strangely recalling the characteristic of the dwarfing people of the Congo of present day, have given rise to the stories of Combloids, elves, sprites, gnomes, and fairies. So they're letting you know that these fairies and gnomes and elves originated from Africa. So it's such thing as these little people. And again, I talk about the Orisha too. So we can go back to the Neteru, and we got to go back to the Orisha, because these archangels too, this new religion or Christianity is built off these more ancient theologies. Okay, so yeah. It says elemental beings is the fairies, the elves, the gnomes, the dwarves, the wee folk, the fae, the wild, the ones, the plant spirits, the water spirits, and the mermaids. These spirits do not only exist in etheric form, they have embodied a form on earth as well. They exist in different dimensions than we do, and we have access to other dimensions but they are the earth beings just like us. Okay? And so they have access to these different dimensions. You'll see that too with animals as well. That like these crypto animals such as the Sasquatch, it has that ability to morph in and out these dimensions. People do say they exist, but they cannot catch them. You'll never be able to catch them because they exist in another part. They're another part of an element. They're going to be able to vibrate in and out of this frequency at will. They have that ability. They were made like that. So, and I don't know if that was in the old world when these elves and gnomes and all that was created, because some of them are just like human, but they don't die like humans. They don't die. They just simply fade out and come back. Their lifespan can be between 300 and 1,000 years. That's what this thing said. It says here, they do not remain individualized as humans. These beings are animated by thought and power of the lower angels, and so are thought forms of sorts. They are the etheric thought forms, yet they have etheric flesh, blood, and bones. They live, propagate, offspring, eat, talk, act, and sleep. They cannot be destroyed by frost or material elements such as fire, air, earth, water, because they are etheric in nature. They are not immortal, though. Okay? When their work is finished, they absorb into the ocean of spirit again. They just go back. They live a very long time, 300 to 1,000 years. The Jews call them Shadim. The Egyptians call them Afris. The Africans call them Yawahoos or Aziza. The Persians call them Devs. The Mayans call them Alex, Joga. They call them by different names. So each culture is calling them by different names, but the fact still remains that these little people, these fairies, gnomes, these elementals do exist. And you have the larger elementals like Oshun or the Neteru, that is the spirit that's residing over the smaller elementals. They got their own hierarchy. You have these fairies, and these fairies say like the Oya is in charge of the fairies, since they're insects. They look like little insects, and they're responsible for plant life and all that. You'll say that Oya is the deity that supervises those fairies. So it's all hierarchy. Somebody is appointed over these fairies and gnomes and all that. A hierarchy in nature. Okay? But yeah, they do exist. They do exist. So I thought I would talk about this subject and maybe inspire you to get more in tune with nature, connect with nature, and it's very, very important, especially if you're going to be working with the Neteru, or if you're going to be working with the Orisha, or any spiritual practice for that matter. Connect with your most ancient ancestors. Connect with nature, because they're responsible for you experiencing life. Without those elements, we wouldn't be able to experience life. So I thank you for being here today. I thank you for supporting the channels and the page. Light and love, may the ancestors be with you.